Hello, and today we'll be talking about the second part of our unit on leisure motivation. So last class we went over some definitions about motivation, what a motive is, a drive, a need, motivational dispositions, etc. We spoke about the general model of motivation, how there's a need and then it provides some sort of action or behavior which leads to a goal or expectation, an outcome. It provides a feedback loop. We discussed intrinsic and extrinsic motivation and various ways of understanding those terms or theories. And then we ended in discussing self-determination theory and how it was related to the various forms of motivation as well as needs. We'll be going back to that again today when we talk about application. And it's also kind of a little review then of self-determination theory for you and how you would apply it in practice. But first, we're going to talk about the danger of rewards and praise and how we can foster perceived freedom and intrinsic motivation, and finally, usefulness and limitations of these theories. So, what are rewards? These are obviously people can be motivated to strive for any form of external reward. And, as we've already discussed, when we talked about extrinsic motivation, external rewards can be money. It could be threat of punishment. It could be, praise, etc., any form of reward. But or an award even. But what happens to people's intrinsic motivation once these rewards are no longer available? If people are just participating because of a reward, what happens when the rewards are taken away? Well, people come to construe their participation as due to receiving the reward itself, which reduces their interest in the activity. As an example, I should mention, this is called the over-justification effect. And an example, I remember my younger sister, who was born in the late 80s, she was really part of kind of what we call this like self-esteem generation, where everything was about boosting children's self-esteem, and everyone got rewards all the time, and the participation ribbons were flying everywhere. And my sister was a smart girl, and I remember it didn't take her very long to kind of realize that she was only getting these participation ribbons and stuff because she showed up. And it reduced her motivation to, want to participate in, track days or whatever the different activities were. So the over-justification effect then is when people are rewarded for their behavior, they may begin to attribute their participation to these extrinsic motives. So we have to be careful because extrinsic rewards can reduce self-determination because it can shift perceived locus of causality from being inside yourself, feeling that the outcomes or the control is within, to it being external. Then it can, especially with children, it can really reduce motivation. So it is when, unfortunately, a lot of rewards are used in order to try to get people to participate in the first place, but sometimes there would be a lot better avenues to get people, to participate, or it's okay to maybe use it as an enticement to start, but then they can't be used for very long. Otherwise, the people will attribute their behavior really to those awards. I'm going to talk about a study that is mentioned in your textbook by Lepper and colleagues. And this is in the 70s, but it really illustrates the concept of the danger of rewards. So now I want to think way back. This is in the 70s. This is even just before I was born even. And they colored markers, like Crayola markers. These things were new. Okay. When I was even a kid, when I was around 4 or 5, the smelly markers even that was the first time. I remember every kid in school we all just had marker on our nose all the time because all we did was smell our markers all day long. And anyway, so I'm trying to set the stage here that these are exciting. These are new. My children wouldn't really care as much about markers anymore. But they gave the children in a group colorful felt tip markers, and they observed how much time they spent playing with them. So they recorded length of time. And that was a measure of intrinsic motivation. Then 2 weeks later, they divided this group of children. By the way, this took place at a daycare at a university. A lot of psychological studies among children are done in daycares at the university. It's part of the psychology department. The parents are agreeing to the experiment. And so the groups were, group 1, they were asked to draw pictures with the markers, and they didn't get any award. The second group, group 2, they drew pictures and received a good player award, and it was expected. The kids knew that they were going to get this award before they started playing with the markers. And finally, group 3 was asked to draw pictures and then received the good player award, but they didn't know they were going to get it. It was unexpected. It was a bonus. Then, the third stage of the experiment, a week later, they put markers in the classroom and observed the amount of time again. Again, as a measure of intrinsic motivation. And this is what they found. The group 2, who expected to receive the award, that the first bar there, they have the lowest intrinsic motivation. They spent the least amount of time with the markers. So they knew they were going to get the award, and so they were like, who cares? I'm not really playing with these markers. Whereas group 1, which is the second bar there, they were asked to draw pictures and received no award, maintained their interest. And number 3, they were asked to draw, and then they did receive it, but it was unexpected. Again, their interest was high. And actually, you would expect group 1 and group 3 to have the exact same motivation. But anyway, this is then an example really showing how the expectation of receiving an award really reduces your intrinsic interest in a behavior. So, autonomy supportive settings. These then are settings that encourage choice, that encourage decision making. So they encourage self-determination and then therefore enhance intrinsic motivation. So settings that are controlling or put pressure to behave a specific way reduce our intrinsic motivation. So when we're participating because of threats or obligations or imposed goals, it really reduces our intrinsic motivation. So we have to, in order to encourage participation, we need to create settings and environments where in social environments where there aren't these extrinsic rewards as much. That doesn't mean that we can't give rewards at all. There are times. You can give a reward when a person is not intrinsically motivated to begin with, just to get them going. But don't continue the reward forever, as an example, I know some parents, there's as a parent, I've learned the many theories and hurdles of potty training. And, I've heard, I remember at my son's daycare, there was one boy who was always going to the bathroom. I noticed it myself just as a parent being there. And then the teacher said it was because his parents were giving him like a couple jelly beans every time he went to the bathroom, on the potty, during his potty training instead of a diaper. And so obviously he didn't actually have to go to the bathroom. Most of the time it was just because he wanted the treat. So he was not doing as well with his potty training. So again, when the person's not intrinsically motivated, so it's very important not to give rewards like that. Wait till the person's ready to. And secondly, we can also give rewards if participation does not depend on the reward and is still under the person's own control. So more when the reward is seen as a bonus. So that's why, it's better, to have things that where rewards are going to happen at the end of the season, or where you just it's better to randomly provide a participant with a reward. And as an example, at my son's school, they I believe they must give a little award every single day to one of the kids. Now, while that's expected, it's just to provide behavior, but it's random. And so when my son came home with it, it then reinforces good behavior, and he's excited, to behave that way all the rest of the year because he just sort of randomly received one when he wasn't really expecting it. We do have to be careful with praise. Praise is primarily viewed as beneficial, but praise can be positive and negative to intrinsic motivation. And there are really 5 factors that affect whether praise enhances or undermines intrinsic motivation. So, and you can just ask, children are really good at sensing this. For example, my son can see right through if I'm not being sincere when I perhaps say that a drawing is very good. So the praise has to be perceived as being sincere. Parents, coaches, or instructors who use sarcasm as a motivational tool may, in fact, for example, be having the opposite effect. Sarcasm is not a very good motivation. Or just kind of lying, especially when you're obviously fibbing. And children in particular can see right through things. So, you can always say something positive. Sometimes you just have to be creative. With grading, I always say something positive, even if I have critical feedback. It might be, it was a thank you for a very nice table of contents. Maybe that's all I can think of, but at least I'm giving something that's positive, and I'm trying my best to be sincere. The praise also has to be realistic, not too high. Telling, someone who's just beginning learning something, like, you're the best in the world, you're so awesome, at that activity can actually undermine intrinsic motivation. Be realistic about, their skill. Thirdly, praise should focus more on effort or process rather than ability. So you should praise the effort or the way in which a person did the activity. For example, you did a great job with the dynamics of that music piece, rather than you are a great musician. So you're putting, by saying someone's a great musician, you're putting it just sort of on this role, and not really on the why you're saying they are good. So, you did a great job with the dynamics of that piece. You're directing and focusing the praise. Fourth, it's important to, I've sort of alluded to this already, that praise provides positive information about the person's competence without comparing it to that of another. So will enhance intrinsic motivation for a longer period of time. For example, not doing peer comparisons. Parents, we do this terrible, why can't you do this like your brother? Or, my mother would compare me to her friends' children, that would be her comparison. Or my father, he used to, when I came home to tell him a good grade, he'd always ask me how this one other classmate did. You always wanted to know how I did compared to my one friend. So, that's not really improving your intrinsic motivation. So, again, if you said, for example, in a leisure context, you want to say, you swam great, you beat your last time. That you're comparing it to their own person, rather than, hey, you beat Stephanie's swim time. That's doing self-comparison, and that kind of praise can reduce intrinsic motivation. And finally, informational praise. So meaning that providing praise that contains specific information that directs as to what was good about what they did is much better than controlling praise. So, and it's best to explain that with this example. So an informational praise would be like, your backhand was really strong. That's more enhancing. It's better than saying, hey, you're finally placing your backhand correctly. No matter how you say that, it sounds like, well, it's a backhanded compliment is what it is. That's controlling praise. So controlling praise especially is more detrimental for females than males, should be noted. And I should also note that in some cultures, for example, in Japan, praise is seldom provided, as it's viewed as sometimes being harmful to a child's character. So obviously a lot of this is also culturally based. So what can we do then to foster freedom and choice and intrinsic motivation in leisure? Well, we can provide opportunities for choice and control, that fosters self-determination. We can be careful with rewards, avoiding perceptions of control and bribery. We can involve people in decision-making, giving them choice. And we can encourage people, when there are external rewards, as part of participation, we can try, though, to encourage internalization and integration of those so that it does become more part of, they enjoy the activity and it can become part of who they are and their identity. And one thing I don't have here, I should have added, is creating autonomy supportive environments. You can create environments where there's a lot of choice. For example, in the play group that HKR has on Saturdays for children in the community, the physical literacy program, it's an autonomy supportive environment. There's usually, 4 to 6 different stations. There's all the equipment out. It is basically inviting choice and saying, here, come and try this or come do that. So that also will foster intrinsic motivation in those activities. So there are strengths and limitations to motivation as well as need theory. These theories are useful because leisure motivation and satisfaction, it helps us, plan types of programs and services that people might want and need. And it can help us give quality services. It can help identify what people seek in their leisure and the differences between people. And obviously we can also use this to try to help to facilitate, healthy behaviors among people, behavior change. But there are limitations. Sometimes people's needs and motives conflict. Life's not all that simple. A lot of theories are black and white, but in reality, in real life, most stuff is in the gray area. So, people want to do something, but they have constraints, whether they're internal or external. It also doesn't describe all behavior, and some needs are complex to satisfy, and also behaviors are very complex. We have these nice linear models here, but people are complex, and it can be difficult to understand people's motivations. Okay, now I want to speak a little bit more about application and using motivation and social determination theory in practice, as well as needs. This is not in the handout, and you will find a supplementary handout specifically on this section on these slides. Application on using motivation and SD in practice. There's no fill in the blanks. I've provided just a fairly comprehensive handout for you, because this, I think, theory is really important, not just for understanding the evaluation, but also to I think that this is a really practical theory to apply, whether you're a physical education instructor, you're a fitness trainer, you're a physio, you're a therapeutic recreationist, or a community recreation, working with youth, seniors, whoever. It really has application. So really, self-determination then theory, it's a theory of motivation and needs. It's concerned with supporting people's natural or intrinsic tendencies to behave in effective and healthy ways. So how is self-determination related to the fundamental needs for autonomy, competence, and relatedness? Well, humans have 3 innate psychological needs. We've talked about these. And intrinsically motivated behaviors are fostered by these 3 innate psychological needs. When these needs are met, behavior is more likely to be intrinsically motivated and thus more likely to be self-determined. So what does this mean? It means to get people to even start a healthy behavior, we really need, or continue it, even get initiated, people will be motivated and self-determined. We have to remember always those 3 needs. So remember those in all of your planning, no matter what field you're in. You should always provide autonomy, choice, and sense of control for people, whether that is choice of activity, choice of equipment, choice of time of day. Just provide them choice. Make sure that people feel competence, that they are mastering and demonstrating behaviors. This also relates to making sure people have the fundamental skills first, whether that is a physical activity or a social activity. People need to understand, be introduced to the steps, and be able to, through praise and you can encourage people and giving them, positive feedback, etc., of when they're doing things correctly. And then finally, we need relatedness, social connection, and sense of belonging. Make sure that you're always introducing yourself. Use people's names. Make sure that your participants know each other. I'm actually very surprised how many different, sports activities I've taken my son to. And the coach, now I'll admit they usually have been young, but they often even forget to introduce themselves, and they don't go around to let the kids know. My son didn't want to keep going to soccer because he said he had no friends there. Well, it was because they didn't know each other. Again, relatedness is very important. So, what is the importance of perceived freedom and control in all this? Well, intrinsically motivated behaviors occur in the absence of external rewards, we know. We know that free choice is also important. So that means that the more perceived choice and sense of control people have over their behaviors, the more self-determined their behaviors are. Letting people choose, in which order to do a sequence of activities. Or, for example, when I was a swim coach, I would let the team sometimes pick the order. We're doing like strokes, these many laps of front crawl, and then this stroke and that stroke, and some of it's synchronized swimming stuff. And letting them sometimes pick the order, or letting them choose the specific strokes. All of this kind of allows them to be self-determined. So how do we also foster then interest among participants? How do we facilitate self-determination? Well, as we've just gone through here, we provide opportunities for choice and control. It's important that we're careful with rewards, as well as avoiding perceptions of control and bribery. And it's not specific here, but that's also being careful with praise. Praise is a form of reward. Involve people in decision making, and we can encourage internalization and integration of extrinsic motivation, even when there's external rewards, by focusing on the core needs. And again, also encouraging relatedness and competence. So how can self-determination be developed even when a person is extrinsically motivated? How can we facilitate a person from being extrinsically motivated to being motivated, like introjected, and then move to the next level, to identified, and then finally move to integrated? What is the role of self-determination in this process? So, going to be using an example. Someone's is physically inactive, and then they're going, how can we get them to move to being self-determined in their walking behavior? So let's say first we have a person who maybe they are very overweight, they're at risk for cardiovascular disease. Perhaps it is in their family, so there's a genetic component, and they have a fairly sedentary lifestyle, and they're over 40 and have started, specifically to gain quite a bit of abdominal fat, for example. So, the doctor is encouraging them that they really need to start walking, and the threat is ill health, in this case perhaps cardiovascular disease. So obviously that person is first extrinsically motivated. Okay, they haven't been physically active, so they are only they're going to start walking every second day, but it's not because they want to, it's because of the threat of punishment from, in a way, from their doctor. But after a while, they start to move to introjected regulation, motivation. So their behaviors are motivated by internal pressure. So what that means is this person then is participating because if they think they should, that they feel guilty. And their doctor told them to, and maybe some of the family members know that, so maybe their spouse is saying, hey, Dr. So-and-so told you to walk, and so are their children. And you can again really focus on helping a person to move from extrinsic motivation to this introjected motivation by focusing on the 3 core needs. And then, now the person has been walking more regularly, and they start to believe that walking is important, and they move into identified motivation. So you can help a person move to this stage by focusing on the benefits of the behavior. For example, in this case, hey, like walking makes you sleep better. Do you notice that? Are you sleeping better? Do you have more energy in the day? Like pointing out the physical benefits. Maybe after they've been walking for so many months, maybe they're not starting to notice that their pants are getting looser or that sort of thing. You really focus on the physiological aspects. And also mood. Maybe the person seems a little bit happier. So, and there could be other benefits that's important that you help them to notice. So maybe the person starts to believe that walking is healthier, that walking improves their ability to do other things, like they're having energy to play with their children. So this identified motivation then is important. Like behaviors are done not because that they truly have interest, but they start to believe that there are benefits. Then the person can move into integrated motivation, and this is when the behavior starts to become a part of the person's identity and lifestyle. So this is complete internalization and integration of the behavior, right? So instead of you're moving from like, I walk in my free time to improve my health, to I am a walker. Maybe the person starts like taking hikes. Maybe they join a hiking club, and it really becomes part of who they are. So this behavior then can be completely internalized and integrated into a person's lifestyle. And the person is now totally self-determined in their behavior. And we know that this is most likely to happen really during leisure activities. And so how does self-determination relate to all this? Well, self-determination is strongest when behaviors are integrated or intrinsically motivated. Therefore, in this process, self-determination increases as one moves from being extrinsically motivated to being intrinsically motivated. And really, no matter what we do, whether you're an educator, whether you're a health provider, fitness, therapeutic rec, community worker, in the end, everyone's goal is to get your client, your student, whoever it is, to be self-determined, whether that's in the community or with a health behavior or with learning. It's all about that. And finally, you'll find on this handout this model, which is just another figure which I found, which provides sort of another nice diagram of how this is all related to each other: needs, motivation, and the theory of self-determination. So for the quiz exam review, make sure that you understand and be able to discuss the general model of motivation. Just be able to identify it. Make sure that you understand motivation theory. Like, for example, what is intrinsic motivation? What's extrinsic? Be able to identify all those different approaches to characterize intrinsic motivation. For example, that it's the absence of external rewards, etc. Make sure that you can understand, identify the different theories. So make sure you can identify the 3 forms of intrinsic motivation by Vallerand and Loisier. Obviously, being able to identify and maybe give a definition of those 5 forms of extrinsic motivation is very important, also since they're related to self-determination. So external, introjected, identified, integrated, and even amotivation. Make sure you understand the difference between all of those. And, I've gone through a big example, but, how do we apply all this? How is this related? How is self-determination then related to autonomy and competence, or are these needs? What's the importance of perceived freedom and control? And how can we encourage intrinsic interest and facilitate self-determination? How do we get someone to move from being extrinsically motivated to being integrated or even intrinsically motivated? And how obviously self-determination in this process is increasing as we move from that. You should know, you wouldn't ever need to be able to draw it, like necessarily know any of the diagrams, although it might help you just to understand the theory. And we did talk about several mini theories, like the basic needs, etc. There's no specific questions on those at all. Make sure that you understand a lot about the rewards and praise. So, why is it dangerous to give rewards and extrinsic regulation and leisure? What's the overjustification effect? When is it okay, though, to use rewards? And what are the 5 factors affecting praise, like whether it's good or bad? In that case, I might give you like quotes of what a coach says, and you need to identify, which one would be the most appropriate. There could be like a multiple choice question on the usefulness and limitations of those theories. And then there's, quite several terms that might be important for you to understand. Not a lot of matching of terms, though, for this section. All right, that is it then for motivation, and hope you've learned some things then about the importance of motivation to leisure and how we can use these theories in helping people be happier in their leisure and lead healthier lives as well.